Hey there. Yeah, it's been a while. Sorry. But I have a small theory to get back into the swing of things today that I want to discuss. I haven't stopped thinking about Deltarune. I know, big shocker, who would have guessed. But I want to talk about an interesting topic that people seem to love talking about, which is the freedom motif. Now, this motif has been talked about all the way since Chapter 2, and has continued to this day. Freedom motif, though, is honestly fairly straightforward in what it represents, as in freedom. It's literally dubbed the freedom motif. But there's something surrounding it with the secret bosses that I want to discuss. So I'll stop wasting time now and let's start talking. So if you don't know what the freedom motif is, then you're probably new to the Deltarune community, to be honest. But if you're watching my channel, you probably know what it is already. I wouldn't be surprised, honestly. But as a brief catch up, the freedom motif is this stretch of song. That stretch of song is shown in other songs of the game, but is predominantly shown, and most notoriously shown, in the secret bosses of the game, most of them. It is dubbed the freedom motif because the bosses that contain it have the text, "The air crackles with freedom," or related texts along those lines in their fights. This is because the secret bosses in their fights are heavily tied to the theme of freedom that Deltarune is heavily presenting. Whether it's escaping the prophecy or the character of just Chris in general under our control, it is clear that, if anything, the freedom is one of the most significant themes of Deltarune, if not the most significant. This is why the motif is talked about so much in the community, because it represents a big thing on the whole scale of Deltarune. However, the only secret boss, which is kind of a secret boss, that doesn't have the freedom motif as a major part of its song is the Roaring Night. Now, many people have wondered why, and I do too. So I want to talk about the implications of why it might not have this motif, and see how this could lead to its motivations and the whole thing surrounding it. So just to talk about the night for a quick second, the night is shown at the end of Chapter 3 and is a mandatory fight, although it's not mandatory to win the fight. Of course, you can choose to or choose not to. If you do, you get a Shadow Crystal, which is kind of why it's a secret boss, but it's not really a secret. But it doesn't matter who the knight is, but they are heavily implied to be working with Chris, and of course that extends to Carol. Honestly, you could think the knight is Carol, Des, or Rudy. It doesn't matter. The implications are very, very similar for this. And I'm not going to go into all the details on how Chris, the knight, and Carol are working together, because it's pretty obvious. Even if Carol isn't the knight, they still definitely are working with the knight. And you probably know how they're all tied together. But if you don't, there are a ton of resources from when Chapters 3 and 4 released, and even past that discuss this information in significant detail. What I want to go over quickly is what this squad is aiming for. As before we talk about the theory, I want to add some context for their goal, probably. Now, I think no matter who you think the knight is, Des, Carol, or even if you're one of those Rudy believers, I don't think it's him. I personally think it's Des Knight, but that doesn't matter for this theory, really. The goal is fundamentally the same for those characters, which is to save Des. If Des is the knight, then it probably seems like they're trapped in that form, and Carol is trying to figure out to get Des back. And if it's the other two candidates, then they're just searching for her. But what really matters is how is going to Carol to get Des back, because Carol's obviously working with the knight, or if Carol is the knight, they're just straight up looking for Des. Is it related to the prophecy? Is it against the prophecy? That's what I want to answer, as I've seen many people debating what their motive is in relation to the prophecy. So, my theory is a relatively small one. It's not a game changer or anything. It's just a fun little thing that I think just might more cement, which I think is the common sentiment within the community. I think that the knight is actively trying to fulfill the prophecy, and so is Carol and Chris by extension. Now, this sounds obvious, right? I mean, it's obvious that they are against us, and the knight is just doing what's in the prophecy panels, pretty much. It's not been proven that they're trying to break it at all. They've been doing what's in it, so clearly. And yeah, if they're against us, we're trying to break the prophecy, and they're trying to stop us. However, I've seen many people think about what the knight and Carol's motives are in relation to the prophecy. And I have seen some people argue that they're trying to break the prophecy to save Des. But I think that is probably false, and they're trying to cement it or make sure it happens. As I mentioned earlier, the knight doesn't have the freedom motif in their fight, which is really odd for the secret bosses. Now, you could make the argument to be that it's because that the knight wasn't supposed to be the secret boss, and it's like supposed to be Ram or whatever in the chapter. But that is a purely speculation thing from the fandom. It is never said that that there was supposed to be a chapter 3 secret boss, but the knight just didn't get to them in time. I don't even know if this was ever supposed to be even hinted at, really. But the freedom motif at the end of the day is used on the secret bosses, and all of the secret bosses tie back to the prophecy in relation to freedom in some way. Now, let's start with just going over these. Now, Jevil thinks he's the only free one in this world. This is very interesting, as it's the loosest one out of the 3 that connects back to the prophecy directly. But I think Jevil has a point that we aren't free, obviously, because of the prophecy, as he probably knows about it, and he knows that we're kind of marching along that path. However, I think possibly the true meaning of this, of him saying he's the only one that's free, is because he is the only significant character in the game that you're not required to meet at all, thus probably being exempt from the prophecy entirely, as he's not required to continue on with the game. Even without Spamton Neo fight, you will still encounter Spamton in the main route, thus he still would be in the prophecy after the Queen driving section. But Jevil is not needed. Whatever, you don't need to beat Jevil, you don't need to see Jevil, you don't need to go to the question mark floor. There is no need to see Jevil, thus he probably isn't in the prophecy, because to fulfill it, Jevil is not necessary, and might actively even be working against it, because the Shadow Crystals might hold the solution to the prophecy of breaking it. Now, Spamton is clearly tied back to the prophecy. While obviously the whole puppet thing with Spamton heavily ties back to our control over Chris, it can also tie back to the prophecy's hold on the story and how it's kind of pulling the strings of all the characters and what will cause to our protagonist. Now, the strings controlling Spamton and holding him up is very similar to what is happening to the fun game. Invisible strings causing them to march forward to a path that they may not be able to change at the end, that they are tied to, even if they're forced to play it out. I would say that Spamton's failure to obtain this freedom with the Neo body could honestly happen to us at the end, where it seems like we have finally obtained the will to change the outcome, but we find out in the end that it was all part of the stories anyways. I would think this, but that would be the direct opposite of what Gerson's fight is all about, and that we have the freedom to change, and that nothing is set in stone, and that we can break the prophecy. Gerson pretty much directly ties to the prophecy in what he's saying, that we have the power to make a change for the better and write a better tomorrow. Now, we don't know what will happen yet. Maybe Spamton's failure is paralleling what will happen on the Snowgrave route instead, where we think that we're changing the story, but we're still puppets on an inevitable path. To be fair, Spamton does have ties to Noel, and Susie has many ties to Gerson, who he says holds the power to make the change with the White Pen of Hope. So by continuing with the Snowgrave and causing Susie to have less of an impact on the story and more of a impact on Noel, that could be fulfilling the prophecy in the end, where we think we're trying to change it, but end up just following along with it. And I do think the knight lacking this theme is showing that it is not free, and it doesn't care, and it will fulfill the prophecy. I don't know why Carol and the knight want to do this necessarily, but I do think this detail is trying to clue us in on this fact. Maybe the prophecy is something detailing what will happen to the knight, thus freeing Des, but I'm not sure, to be completely honest. I guess that it will be related to Des somehow, because I guarantee you Carol's main motive is Des, so the prophecy probably entails something like that if they are trying to fulfill it. So, that's the theory. It's nothing too important, but I thought it was more interesting on how the secret bosses tie back to the prophecy, more than what Carol of the Night was up to, honestly, to be honest. It was just fun to make, to be honest. As always, on any theory I make, if you have something that is bothering you, or the fact that I just completely missed something and am wrong, and that completely falsifies my theory, please tell me. I'd rather know I'm wrong than pretend thinking I'm right and everyone thinks I have no clue what the hell I'm talking about. Please, because I'm not perfect at this, and I will never be. But yeah, I'm very sorry for the lack of uploads. I will try to upload every week again. I will try, or for the most part, almost every week. I was just so busy in September, and then I've just been like scrapping videos since, to be honest. Like I've had so many on the back burner that I just scrapped. Even though they're probably fine. Like my motivation was there, but I just didn't feel very confident maybe in the topic, or was just doubting my capabilities of making a good video in general, or a good video out of those topics. I came up with them, and those topics are probably fine. I should probably revisit them, but who knows? Maybe I won't. Maybe they were actually bad. I gotta take a second look at some of them. I am working on other things too. Like, I am working on a bigger video if it doesn't get scrapped. However, it won't be related to Deltarune, just so you know. But that bigger one specifically. But I will keep uploading Deltarune content. It's just something I also just want to talk about, because I don't want to just limit myself to Deltarune necessarily. But I do still want to talk about it, because I do deeply care for the game, and I'm interested to see where it goes, obviously, to the end. Chapter 5 is releasing next year. I doubt it will be early next year, I will say that. My guess is probably, I don't know, like October next year. That would be my guess, my best bet. But hey, if it's early, that's way better, to be honest. Anyways, thanks for watching. Sorry for, like, talking a lot at the end.